This is Brandon Turner, and you are listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast.
If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like and subscribe buttons. If you're listening to our podcast, go leave us a 5-star review. All of our links can be found in the video description or show notes below.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I'm your host, Tanya, the Money Life Coach. And today we have our guest, Leadership Larry Mietus. He is the Chief Excuse Obliterator. I love that. He's the CEO and author and speaker, business consultant. He's been helping people in all kinds of areas of leadership for a long time. So welcome, Larry, to the podcast.
Tanya, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and what Chief Excuse Obliterator means to you, because everyone has those excuses, right? Let's jump right into what that means.
As you noted, I've been an independent business consultant for 20 years. I'm an author. I've been a speaker for technically 50 years. I started speaking in public when I was in grade school and said, hey.
Yeah, it's like when you were two years old.
Yeah, this doesn't bother me. I think I can do this. And we just never looked back. So those are the legs that hold up my chair. But I knew I wanted to write a book for quite a while. And like everyone else, I procrastinated and found excuses why I couldn't, why I shouldn't. But I really struggled to get my arms around what should the book be about that's a little bit different than the thousands upon thousands of business and leadership and management books that are already in the marketplace. And just like a movie, I literally woke up one night at 3:00 in the morning and bam, it was there.
Wow.
And I wrote down some notes and I woke up the next day and I said, okay, I'm going to build off of this. But the title of the book is We Tried That Once and Other Popular Excuses That Sabotage Business Success. And the book has 13 chapters. Every chapter's a pretty popular excuse that I've heard, I've seen, you've heard, you've seen. Maybe we create ourselves, rely on ourselves. And the real root of the book is if there's really a problem, let's dive in, do a root cause analysis, and let's try to solve the problem. But have we built a culture, especially as leaders or business owners, entrepreneurs, have we built a culture that just readily accepts these excuses and doesn't do the investigation just because it's convenient to say, oh, I ran out of time, or no one's going to notice. My accountant takes care of all those financial things. I don't need to know anything about that. Yeah. And I listen inside of organizations and I listen to people and you hear a lot of excuses and they're rarely called out. And not in a nasty, mean, inflammatory way. Just, hey, Tanya, what does that mean? You just said you don't have the right tools. Do we buy the tools? Can you tell us what you need? Whatever the case may be. I've come to this conclusion after 20 years of consulting that probably 80% of the time, the excuses really are legitimate. They're just convenient. I started being the guy who stops the train, asks questions about the excuse, and does the investigation and potentially the problem solving. So then my brain flipped one day and said, you're the Chief Excuse Obliterator. Let's blow these excuses up. So that's where the phrase and the name came from.
That's really cool. That's something that reminded me of is when I started working in corporate more. I've had a couple different career paths and things like that. But about 10 or so years ago, when I started with a company called Stitch Fix, it's a clothing box where they send you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I worked for them for a little while. And the corporate culture there, something that they always said was like, come to us with the not the problem, the solution. Like, what's the solution? You know what I mean? Having people think differently. So it's don't come with me to complain about XYZ. It's what are, and that is a different mindset shift because the culture for so long was built complaining and excuses, like you said. So how do you start to shift that, or what are some main tips?
Another thing I hear a lot from business owners is, geez, I wish my employees, my associates, my staff, whatever we call them, I wish they would think like me. I wish they would think like an owner. And I look at those people and I say, that's great. That's perfect. When was the last time you started teaching them to think that way?
Mhm.
And then excuse, I don't have time to do that. They're not smart enough to understand whatever the excuse is. And I'm like, no, if you teach people how your business works and you teach them how a company makes profit, they'll start to understand the role they play and they'll work differently. The bottom line in America, Tanya, really is we don't do anything more than we work. We don't sleep more. We don't spend more time eating. We don't spend more time on vacation. We don't spend more time reading. We work in this American culture. And people laugh at me and think I'm crazy, but I always say, I wish everyone's wildly in love with what they do for a living because you're spending most of your life there.
Yeah.
And if you're miserable, it's not good. And I understand some companies are unionized and some are publicly traded and some are privately held. It depends on the business model. But if we can get people coming to work understanding, like, what are the strains that the CEO is under?
Mhm.
If I have 7 expense lines in my household, gas, electric, water, insurance, food,
Yeah.
but geez, the company I work for has 77 expense lines.
Mhm.
Who knew? And how
Yeah.
do I impact that? I meet a lot of workers, frontline workers who go, "Oh, Tanya's the CEO. We did 15 million in sales last year, so she's a millionaire." No.
Yeah.
Like last week, we barely made payroll. And here's
Right.
why.
Yeah.
And here's how you impact that. There's actually a book called The Great Game of Business by an author named Jack Stack. And his whole premise is people like to compete and adults like to compete, but adults like to compete and win. So if we teach business like a game, how to maneuver, how to shift, how to use strategy, we'll get better results and we'll have more fun while we're playing instead of
Yeah.
just going to work going, hey, this is all out of my control. And sometimes I walk into places that go, every year, Larry, I get my 4% cost of living increase in my check, and that's great. And that's as good as it's going to be. And I roll the numbers and go, what if we could get you a 20% raise this year? Would you be in? Would you be willing to understand how this business runs, how it makes profit, and how you impact that to possibly make that much more money? Do you want to be in? Do you want to learn that? And usually people go, oh, yeah. But it takes an effort. It takes
Yeah.
and all my IT friends tell me that this thing on top of our necks, this head, think of it as a computer, we use about 15% of it. 85% is not used. So there's a lot of room to grow there. There's a lot of room to learn
Mhm.
and take on new tasks and learn new assignments and understand finance and money and business. Even very simple things. Sometimes I'll say to a CEO of a company, who are your competitors? And they'll name people within a 5-mile radius. I'm like, what about the company that does what you do halfway around the globe? What about the global economy? What about the internet? What about online sales? And they look at me like I have 10 heads, like, well, who ever thought of that? We need to think about that. So,
Yeah. No, it's true because a lot of businesses and business owners, they get like tunnel vision and they're just like doing their thing and they think, yeah, like you said, they don't stop and take the time to reflect. I think what I was hearing you say too is like more transparency and having people at the companies understand like how the business is running and how they can impact it.
yeah, as a consultant, quite honestly, my clients, I encourage them all to have, I call them SOC meetings, SOC, state of the company meetings. And I say, have them 3 or 4 times a year, once every quarter. Everyone is invited. And if you can't be there physically, then you're there on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever. And the agenda is always the same. Here's where our performance metrics are year to date against our goal and compared to last year. Here's what's new in the world of people. And those people could be the people that work with us and for us, or the people that are our prospects and our customers. Here's some education. And oh, by the way, because the CEO and all the C-suite people are here, as long as you ask a question respectfully, you can ask anything.
Yeah.
Directly.
Love that.
So at the end of these sessions, if anybody walks away and says, I don't know what's going on in my company, either they chose not to be there or they're not paying attention because there are no secrets.
Yeah.
And that's why we have employees sign non-disclosure agreements. Because I've had CEOs say to me, what's to stop Tanya from going out for coffee tonight and cocktails and telling the whole world what our finances are? If she does that and we find out, she's fired.
Having trust, it's about the hiring process too, and like who you're hiring, people who are honest and don't, I want to say the majority of people are honest and aren't going to be like posting and saying stuff that
Exactly. Exactly.
is like
And then
that.
the more they understand again about the finance, the more excited people get. I have a client one time, we had a meeting behind the building at the end of a shift in a dumpster. And I literally climbed into the dumpster and said, who threw this out? It's brand new, but you didn't pay for it, so it doesn't hurt you. But guess what? At the end of the year, it's going to hurt. And you threw it away because you didn't have to spend your money. And once people start to understand, even waste, even running water, lights on, lights off, all of those things, LED versus an incandescent bulb, once we get people thinking, it sounds like we're pinching pennies, but guess what? We are, because those pennies add up to big dollars at the end of the year. If we get people on that same mindset, it really can change a culture. And I say, look, let's hire people that are competent, that we trust. And then I say to business owners and leaders, your job is to move the barriers that are preventing them from being more successful. That's your only job as a leader. Move barriers. Let them do what they know how to do. Don't get back in the trenches and try to do it for them.
Yeah.
You hired them, you trust them to do a job. Let them do the job. Just make sure there's no obstacles and they have the right tools.
Yeah. No, I love that. I can tell you're super passionate about this. What's your background and why is this so important to you, teaching this stuff?
I guess I was born, I'll say, with a servant leadership mentality. I've always liked to help people. I've always liked to serve people. I tell all the leaders I work with that it's incumbent on this generation of leaders to raise the next generation of leaders and influence them. It just doesn't happen by osmosis because we're in the same coffee shop, we're in the same room. The good news is the youngest workers in today's workforce, Gen Zs and millennials, they're pushing hard to have constant exposure to talented leaders. You can't say to a new hire anymore, in 6 months, you get to meet the CEO. They want to meet the CEO in the next 6 minutes. Or they might not come back from lunch. They might find a new job. And I'm totally fine with that because we need to raise that next generation. I waited tables and tended bar to pay my way through college. I said, I'm not going to have a student loan. And so I just always was about how do you take care of people? I totally believe what goes around comes around. With technology. It might be a little bit faster, but behind all that technology, we're still people dealing with people. And if I can help you, if I can take care of you, someday it might be 20 years from now, you might be able to help me. And I do a lot teaching younger people about how to use their life networks and their business networks. And you don't walk up to the network every day going, what can you do for me? You walk up to the network every day saying, what can I do for all of you? How can I help you? And I think that's really what drives me. Only about 5% of the US population are entrepreneurs. And I'm honestly surprised that the number's that low. And I understand why. A lot of people are afraid to go out on their own, etc. But there are so many resources available. And I just pride myself on being one of those resources. I'd like to see people become, I call it, wildly successful.
Yeah, I love that. So I think one of the most important things, like you were saying earlier, if you could just teach people, we spend so much time working, if you could do something you're passionate about. And I feel like that's all rooted in finding a way to be able to help and serve other people. Because if you don't have that mindset, and even if you're at a big company, you could be like, okay, even at Stitch Fix, right? I was like, we're helping people find clothes that they look good and feel good. We're building them confidence. So it's like that, articulating that as a leader too is really important. Yeah, sure, I might be working at such and such company and we make computer chips and this seems like this boring job, but what actually impact are you making? And focusing on that instead of the shift on ourselves, like help me. I think that's a huge
right. I'm seeing more companies become intrapreneurial, and by that, Tanya works for us 95% of the 40-hour work week. She works for us, and we pay her, and she works on our stuff. But 5% of the week, we still pay her. She uses our resources, but we know she's got this side gig interest, and it may or may not be related to our business, but we'll let her be on our payroll and use our resources to pay attention to that thing she really cares about, that she's trying to figure out, launch, create, build. And I've seen companies work out arrangements where they go, hey, if that takes off, then we own 1% of that. Or we go out in the world and be successful, and we'll help you get launched. Most of the very wildly successful companies I know are looking to help their associates do extremely well and if they move on. They're never worried because they've got such a great culture and such a great reputation. They're never worried about bringing people in because there's a line at the door of people that want to work in companies like that.
Yeah.
Because word down on the street that it's not all about the company, it's about all of us.
Yeah. No, 100%. And that's like where the scarcity can come in business. Like talking to my friend the other day, he's talking about the lady who's always taking so much time off and kind of taking advantage of unlimited PTO. And I was like, well, she performing? And not really, but I don't want to take the time to hire somebody else. It's you got to figure that piece out, because there is a line of people right now, especially in the job market, who will show up and who want to get a job and have a stable income.
Have your friend call me. We'll fix that in 10 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think there's just that point of being like overwhelmed by it all. So how do you help explain like how you work with companies? Like they have you come in and help them work with the leadership team, like the CEOs, and with the staff itself, or like how do you navigate?
It depends. Every situation is different. And like I said, usually when I first go into a place, I just observe and I try not to say much. And I read a lot of body language because it tells the truth. Are people smiling? Are they working together in a pleasant manner? Is the place bright? Is the place clean? Do people have faces to the floor? Are people kicking things and muttering under their breath? It tells you right there what's going on. Are the leaders on site? Are they anywhere to be found? Have they been seen in the last 30 days? All of that adds up. And really, when my mom was alive, she used to say, what do I tell my girlfriends you do for a living? I said, Mom, keep it simple. I either go into companies that have a problem and they know what it is, but they can't figure out the solution on their own. Or I go into some companies, and this has been more so the case since the pandemic, and they look at me and they say, for some reason, we're still not back to pre-pandemic operational sales profitability levels, and we can't get our arms around that. Can you help us figure that out? But quite often, I go into companies that are already really very solid companies, and they just incrementally want to keep getting better. They're not satisfied staying where they are, which is phenomenal. It's fantastic. It's always about baby steps and small degrees of positive movement. And then we involve whoever has to be involved. I've been in steel mills at 3 o'clock in the morning and are interviewing every single person that works there to get their take on what's happening in that place they call work. And then you identify what are the issues, what's the impact, what are the priority of solving those issues, who's responsible for what, and then we dig in and make sure things get done. Mm-hmm. A lot of places, I hate to say it, and somebody way smarter than me coined this phrase a long time ago. The problem with success is it breeds complacency. And a lot of really successful companies don't want to change anything because they go, look at how well we're doing.
Totally.
But that day sneaks up and creeps up where there's an issue and they don't know how to deal with it. And all of a sudden they're on a decline. The smart companies are always asking how come, why not, what if, when should we? And quite honestly, I was using a corporate check one day to pay a bill. And the woman looked at the name of my company and she asked me what I did. And she said, let me ask you, what's the number one thing that you think gets any business in trouble? And I looked at her and I said, it's ego. It's not being willing to ask, willing to learn, willing to listen. It's thinking you can do everything on your own. Read an article the other night, it might have been in Forbes, and Steve Jobs said the same thing. He said, when entrepreneurs especially are in trouble, it's because they don't seek help. They just want to do it all and they wait too long and then it's too late. Honestly, some of my clients I work with 3 days a week for years. Some of them I'm in there for one full day and I'm gone for 6 months.
Okay.
And it's funny because my job is to make myself, as a consultant, not a speaker, my job is to make myself unemployed. Can we fix what needs to be fixed? Can I teach them how to operate differently? And then they shouldn't need me.
Yeah.
But in a few months, something comes up and they call back and you're like, hey, can you come back? Now this is going on. So, that's the story.
It's like the tagline, the Hinge dating app. It's like the app that's meant to be deleted. Like you go on a date. That's like Larry right here.
There you go.
After I know, I thought that was a clever tagline or strategy that they had. I was like, yeah, that's true. You don't want to have to get on this app.
Have to keep coming back. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about like how people. No, actually, I want to know what are some companies that you look up to? Who inspires you in leadership and the companies that you really are like, wow, they're doing it right. Like that you
I was a fan years ago. I'm still a fan of companies like Zappos, because they were one of the first companies that really started promoting positive, healthy, inclusive, customized culture.
Yeah.
And even though the name of my company is Speaking of Strategy, I'm here to tell you that every single day, culture beats strategy every single day. You give me an A culture and a C strategy, we're going to win. You give me a C culture and an A strategy, we might do okay, because a strong culture knows how to survive all the storms, the pandemics, and everything else that comes along. And I've always said the companies that failed during COVID were already on a path to fail before anybody even knew what the coronavirus was. And the companies that pivoted and shifted and put their thinking caps on and used their resources to reinvent themselves and stay in business, they already had that mindset years ago, before there was a pandemic. I'm a big fan of fun. I said earlier today, we spend most of our life at work. So why aren't we going in, having a good time, getting along with people, being wildly successful, making crazy profit? And there's a difference. I meet a lot of people who say, help me grow my business. And I look at them and I say, that might not be the answer. Why don't we talk about growing your profit? Because sometimes growing your business means a lot more stress, a lot more headache, and less profit, and less profit. And that's where that financial education comes into play. Everyone should be able to read an income statement, a cash flow, and a balance sheet. I have a friend who's a CPA, and he said, most people hate the numbers, but the numbers tell a story. If you can read the story and understand it, you can start to ask better questions, and you can make changes that are going to have a positive impact.
Yeah. It's the same thing in personal finance. It's like what I see weekly coaching people that come to me. It's like, where's all my money going? I'm making 6 figures. I'm doing this. And then here are the numbers. Here's where your money's going. You're eating half of it, whatever.
Oh, I'm exactly geared the same way. Sometimes people go, well, this is my $800 a month car payment. I'm like, how about getting a $400 a month car payment, which really, when you think about it, for most Americans, that's like a cup of coffee at a major coffee chain every day. So I say, would you rather have the coffee or drive the brand new car? And guess what? The $400 car per month is going to get you to the same place as the $800 car per month. And I get it. Some people need a prestigious vehicle and this, that, and the other thing. But most people don't.
Yeah.
And one of our sons is a great example. One of our sons is 29 years old. During the pandemic, he bought his first house. We taught him to shop at warehouse blowout auctions and online auctions. He bought $5,000 worth of furniture for $500.
Oh my God.
No one has ever walked into his house and said, dude, this looks like secondhand furniture. They all walked in and said, wow, where is this stuff from?
Yeah.
And I'm like, look, if you want to pay full price, go ahead, but try not to.
Yeah. Well, especially with the car payment and even your mindset around like the student loans, hard for people to, it's so marketed to us, and comparison is really hard nowadays.
Yes.
Probably even in bigger companies. Oh, so-and-so's doing this, and comparing each other to like what we should or shouldn't be doing. But yeah, it's difficult. It's really hard for a lot of people to live below their means. I always say you can't just live within your means to get ahead. You need to live below your means to actually fast track to where you want to go and save.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because I'm a big fan, huge fan. Probably if I look up to any one person as a business person, it's probably Warren Buffett. The guy's living in the same house he's been in since 1962, I think.
Yeah.
His daughter shames him into buying new cars because he'd still be driving his 1972 Buick LeSabre.
Yeah.
And he's the guy who said, I don't need a huge corporate office. I don't need a jet airplane. And that's, earlier I said ego, that's where ego comes in. And if you can keep your ego in check, and don't get me wrong, I don't want people to hear what I'm not saying. It's nice to have nice things. And it's especially nice to pay for them if you work for them. But if you really can't afford them, and you really shouldn't have them, to put yourself in financial jeopardy is not a good idea. And I love that concept of living below your means, because if on purpose or accidentally or totally out of your control, your life takes a step down, you're still fine.
Totally.
The people that live on the edge every day, and you mentioned them earlier, 6-figure income, where's my money? If you don't know where your money's going, I always say, you should know what everything in your house is worth. You should know what your home is worth. I say to every CEO I coach, if somebody walked into your business today with a blank check and said, I'm here today to buy your business, tell me what number to write on this line, 99% of them don't know.
Mm.
Like, how can you not know what your business that you're killing yourself to build is worth? And how you would turn down that opportunity or get bamboozled because you took a number that was too low?
Yeah.
How do you not know the value of your business? And those are the things that the business acumen that people, they don't take the time to develop, or they say someday I'll get there and someday never comes.
Yeah. It's like Shark Tank 101, right? It's like when people
Hmm.
go in the tank and they have to give them the numbers, and sometimes they're like, I don't know, or they throw out like that their company's worth 3-4 times whatever it is, way more than it actually
Right.
is or whatever for perceived. Maybe I'm going to make this money next year. And they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, well, the seller of a business always has this magical thing called sweat, equity, and goodwill baked into their valuation number of the business. And
Yeah.
guess what? The buyer never looks at your business that way. They
Yeah.
go, well, you made that choice. You work 90 hours a week for 72 straight years. That's on you. I'm not paying you for that.
Mhm.
I'm paying you for what your business could generate on a financial spreadsheet. That's what I'm I mean, let's face it, years ago, Unilever bought the Dollar Shave Club, and I think they bought them for $1 billion. They could care less about razors and razor blades. What they wanted to buy was their customer list, and that's what they paid for.
Mhm.
But they knew that going in. Sometimes I say to people, if you have 7 lines of business in your company, what's the most valuable? What's the most profitable? And if you were going to sell something or spin off a division, which one would it be? And people look at me and go, gee, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think, yeah, I love Dollar Shave Club and like what they did and how they disrupted the industry and like what they were doing. And I feel like that was interesting too, because I've seen what a lot of companies do is either try to buy other companies too quickly. I've been at other companies who've done that, or they have one good product, but they don't continue to make it great. Like they just start adding on more and more products that actually, if you just focused on this one thing, razors, we're really good at this and we're really good at customer, whatever service. Sometimes just keeping it more.
No,
simple.
you read my mind, because one of the things I always preach is you either, as a business person, as a company owner, there's a choice to make. You either go super, super narrow and drill down to the center of the earth, or you go super, super thin and wrap yourself around the globe. But you
Yeah.
can't do both. You
Right.
can't do both. You don't have the time, the effort, the energy, the resources, the money. You don't have any of that to do both. And a lot of companies, again, because of ego, go, yeah, I can do both.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Totally.
It's
Or
not
everyone who wants to help everybody. But I like the Amazon example for sure. So, okay, Amazon started out selling books and they tried that for X amount of time and really like that was their main focus. And then they started slowly. It wasn't like the beginning where like, we're going to sell every single product on our website. It was like, no, let's focus on this one thing and try to get this off the ground and then pivot from there.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's jump into the final round. And I'd love to hear, what is the biggest mistake that you've made when it comes to your finances or business life?
When it comes to my finances, I'm going to say I wish I would have started investing at a younger stage in my life, but I understand why I didn't, because I didn't understand what that meant. My parents, God bless them, were both, my mom graduated high school, my dad graduated grade school. So they couldn't counsel me on money. They couldn't counsel me on, do I go to college? How do I pay for it? I love them, they love me, but they didn't have that experience. So I didn't start to meet people who had personal financial savvy until I was a little bit older in my life. My wife and I, we've gone out of our way to make sure our kids understand the second you can open up a 401k and minimize your tax exposure and all those other things, do that as soon as you can. Biggest business mistake, honestly, I think I've loved almost every single job I've had. I had one job for 2 days in a drugstore that I hated. I quit.
Okay.
I couldn't. I was there 2 days and I'm like, no, this is not a track to management. This is torture for me.
Mhm.
I've been on my own for 20 years, and I actually wish I would have started that a little bit younger, but I plan on never retiring. So I'm going to make it up on the back end. I love what I do. I don't feel like I work.
Yeah,
And I really can't see a reason to stop.
that's great. I love that. What's something that you've learned that you wish you would have known when you first started out in your business?
My business again has 3 or 4 different legs, and so I have 3 or 4 different answers. The speaking industry has changed dramatically, so it's constantly reinventing itself. So just navigating that, I think a lot of people try to be in that industry. Not many people make a full-time living in that industry, but some of them do. And I appreciate what I've been able to learn from people like that. I think travel makes you an expert. It's not fair, but it's perception versus reality. And I've found that as a consultant, as a speaker, and as an author, I can do what I do an hour from where I live and charge X. I can do what I do 3,500 miles from where I live and charge X to the power of 10. I didn't get any smarter. I didn't get any more experience. There's this nuance of travel makes you an expert. So I wish I would have started traveling sooner.
I've never heard about, that makes sense. But
Yeah, I'm in Buffalo, New York. If I speak an hour away in Rochester, I'll get an audience, I'll get a crowd, and they'll pay X. But I can give the same presentation in Las Vegas, and I have, and they're like, oh my gosh, this guy got on a plane and flew here. He must be brilliant.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so true. He's from across the United States.
Yeah.
So far. No, I love that. That's a really good tip. Do you have any tips or tricks that you recommend to someone who is just getting started in their business or with that speaking career, whatever you think?
Sure. Well, there's overlap. Tell everyone. And by that, because some people say, I'm not going to tell anybody because if I fail, it doesn't work out. They're going to know. Tell everyone because they hold you accountable. When I decided to write a book, I told everyone who would listen to me. So every single time they would call or text or write or stop at my house or see me at lunch, they'd be, is the book almost done? How you doing? Can I help you? When's the book going to be done? When's the book coming out? And I was like, okay, I guess I got to really do this.
Totally.
Yeah. And like I said before, don't put yourself on an island. There are always resources available. There are always people willing to mentor. Again, I read an article the other night. I might misquote it, but I think Steve Jobs said when he was 12 years old, one summer, he reached out. He wrote a letter to the president of Hewlett Packard and said, I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. I'm a 12-year-old kid. I'm trying to build my own computer. Do you have any scrap parts? And they sent him a box of parts for free.
Oh my God, I love that.
And like the next summer, they hired him as an intern. My wife laughs at me because I guess my motto is if you don't ask, you don't get. And we talk ourselves out of so many things in life. And all you've got to do is ask. There's only 3 answers. Yes, no, or maybe. And I will tell you this about me. You can look me in the eye and tell me no, tell me to drop dead. I'm fine with that. You can tell me yes, and I'm probably going to be pretty excited.
Yeah.
If you tell me nothing, I'm like a junkyard watchdog with a bone. I'm not dropping the bone until you give me an answer. I'm polite. I'm professional. I'm persistent. But ignoring me, my brain's not geared for that. I need a yes or a no or a maybe. And don't be afraid to reach high. I can tell you about some of the corporate executives that I've reached out to. And even my boys go, Dad, you called who? I'm like, they're either going to talk to me or they're not.
Yeah.
You know, they eat the same way I do. They dress the same way I do. They probably drive the same way I do. At the end of the day, we're all human beings and we have to look out for each other.
Yeah, it is about that follow-up for sure. Because in my original career as a journalist, getting my name out there, that was the hardest thing of getting people to like see what you're doing. And so it was like that constant. I had one editor, I saw him, it was just in the snowboarding industry, but I saw him on the mountain and then he knew who I was because I'd emailed him so many times.
Right.
He's yeah, I got your, like, I was like, okay, good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great tip of the follow-up because people are like, oh, I sent an email. Like you said, that's that excuse, right?
Yeah.
That comes in of, oh, I reached out.
I guess I'm not interested.
Yeah.
And you've got to be perceptive. I just read a book. I'm not going to say who wrote the book, but it's a person who's a business person, entrepreneur. They have 1 or 2 television shows. And in the book, they actually wrote, I'm assuming they're telling the truth, that they read the majority of their email on Saturday morning. So guess when I email this person?
No.
Saturday morning.
Those little tips, right? Do your research.
Yeah.
Be different and think outside the box. Because that's the other thing too. Like I was the same way, like persistence, just like I will email them every day and then they'll keep seeing my name and they'll give me an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And even when I've been speaking jobs, and the speaking industry is anywhere from 6 months to usually 18 months out of event planning. Sometimes I'll call an event planner and the event's next week and I know they didn't hire me. And I'll say, look, just keep my resume in your drawer because unfortunately life happens. People get sick, people pass away, flights get missed. And if you need somebody in a pinch in the 11th hour, think about me. You didn't hire me up front, that's fine. But if your back's against the wall, you need somebody who can bail you out. I'm that guy.
Yep.
And a lot of times they're like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that because it's never happened to me before. We've never not had somebody show up.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great tip. Yeah, for sure too. I've done that too. Yep. Love that. Do you have any favorite, you spoke about some books earlier, besides your own, what are some of your favorite business investing or real estate related books or podcasts that you like?
One of my favorite books is called The Extraordinary Leader by Jack Sanger. Jack's actually a friend, and he does what I do, except I think Jack's 93 years old now. He's phenomenal. He's based in Oregon, and it's all about, do we turn managers into leaders? And sometimes we don't. I loved Good to Great. It's a little bit dated. That was a great book by Jim Collins. There's a book called Creative People Must Be Stopped. I like that book because it talks about creativity and innovation and what can disrupt that flow. You know what? I actually got a recommended reading list. I could actually email it to you. There's a number. I like Strength Finder 2.0 because I think everyone should be able to look at themselves and go, here's what I'm really good at.
Yeah. That's
and here's what I don't want to do. Here's what I'm not good at.
Yeah. Yeah. That alone, like that assessment of knowing is super big. Thanks so much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about where people can find you, your website, your book, all the things, so that we make sure that we get those.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I feel like we could talk till the sun goes down. Yeah. So my website is speakingofstrategy.com. The way it sounds, speakingofstrategy.com. There's info there about all the things I do. The book's available there. The book is also available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If you just go into the search bar and put "We Tried That Once," it'll pop up. You'll find it. It's available in hardcover and in e-version. My email address is leadershiplarry@gmail.com.
Great.
And I have no problem people calling me. If people want to call me, they can call me at 716-901-4352. My promise when I speak, especially, and I'll say to people, look, it might be a week, a day, a month, a year, or 10 years. If you reach out to me and you have a question, or you need a sounding board who's not married to you, doesn't live with you, doesn't sign your paycheck, doesn't own a company with you, you need an outside opinion, reach out to me. If I'm alive, I'm getting back to you. I just want to help people out.
I love that. Oh, thanks, Larry. That's really generous of you. And yeah, super excited to read your book too. I love those topics and no more excuses. So to close things out, do you have any final words of wisdom or final thoughts you want to give our audience?
I do. I'm going to fire a couple off really quickly here
for
people to digest. Number one, you have to understand how money works. And that means everything: loans, interest, bank covenants on loans, all of those things. We talked about it. I think people have to identify their passions and pursue their passions. I think you have to know your personal comfort level with risk in personal life and professional life. Understand what your time is worth. A lot of people say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I only make minimum wage. If you can justify to me that you're worth $300 an hour, let's do it. But how do you know? And how do you build that track record? Be a bargain hunter. I talked about my son and some of the things he bought, but that applies to our businesses. We already said, know what your business is worth, know what all your personal property is worth, grow your profit. Might not be the same thing, is not the same thing as grow your business.
Totally.
I think work hard personally and professionally on building a mindset and a culture of self-accountability. Not me holding you accountable, you holding you accountable.
Yeah.
I like the thought of creating, again, obviously, a mindset and a culture of no excuses. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's solve it. Let's fix it. Let's move on. I think we all need to work as humans, as personal people and business people. Work on your succession plan. Most leaders I deal with never want to talk about that. Oh. I'll figure it out someday. The day you don't show up to work is not the day to figure it out.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got family and partners in business. I think you have to think about your exit strategy. I read a lot lately about our Americans retiring too early, too late. What's your exit strategy from life? We all know what that is. We don't want that for anyone. What's it going to mean? What are you going to do with yourself when you get to retirement age? And then I think maybe the most important thing I can leave on the table, Tanya, is I encourage people to learn every single day, 7 days a week, 365. If you're going to bed tonight and your head's hitting the pillow and you're starting to nod off and you realize today you learned nothing new, I challenge you to get out of bed and learn something, because again, there's 85% of this capacity of our brain that we're not using.
Yeah.
So fill it up.
Great advice. I love all that. And great reminders. A lot of things we know, it's okay. Just reminding ourselves of that for sure. Thanks so much, Larry. We really appreciate you taking the time today and being here. And yeah, definitely go check out his book and his website, and you can give him a call today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast, the Average Joe Finances podcast. Make sure you go and leave us a 5-star review and let us know what you liked about today's episode, and make sure you share it. So we'll see you later from Lake Tahoe. And Larry says goodbye from New York. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.